Virat Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Bihari Gopijana Vallabha Jaya Girivaradari Jaya Girivaradari Gopijana Vallabha Jaya Girivaradari Jaya Girivaradari Jaya Yashodanandana Jaya Raja Janana Jaya Yashodanandana Jaya Raja Janana Yamuna Tiravanachari Jaya Kunjabihari Jaya Kunjabihari Yamuna Tiravanachari Jaya Kunjabihari Jaya Jaya Kunjabihari Jaya Madhava Jaya Kunjabihari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Gopidana Vallabha Jaya Girivaradari Jaya Girivaradari Gopijana Vallabha Jaya Girivaradari Jaya Girivaradari Jaya Jaya Yashodananda Jaya Raja Janara Jana Jaya Yashoda Jaya Jaya Raja Janara Jana Jaya Yamuna Tira Chari Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Kunja Bihari Yamuna Tiravana Chari Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Kunja Jaya Madhava Jaya Kunja Vihari, Jaya Jaya Radha, Madhava, Jaya Kunja Vihari, Jaya Radha, Madhava, Jaya Kunja Vihari. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hey, Shri Radha Damodar ki jai. Hey, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Vishnupada Paramahansa Vijakacharya. Asta Tarasata Shri Srimad Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada ki jai. Jayam Vishnupada Paramahamsa Vijakacharya. Asta Tarasata Shri Srimad Grace Srila Bhaktivedanta Saraswati Thakur Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada ki jai. It's disappearance day today, right? Krantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Nitai Gaur Premanandi Hari Hari Bo. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. They're reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the King of Books, Canto 6. Oh, really? Dear Tarika Prabhu, I was told by His Grace Venu Madhurya Prabhu, leader of the Vaishnavas, I'm supposed to read on Canto 6, Chapter 8, text number 35 and 37.
We covered them.
I wasn't in a class yesterday because it started very late.
Yesterday we covered through 42, which was the last Text of chapter 8.
Glorious. So we're beginning chapter 9, text number 1, but I'll read the chapter summary. Oh, I had some nice things to say about Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, Prabhupada. So I may have to employ that age-old tactic where you start Srimad Bhagavatam class, but then somehow talk about something else. Let's see. But let's begin this summary of chapter 9 of the sixth canto, which is the appearance of the demon Vritrasura. Vritrasura. As described in this chapter, Indra, the king of heaven, killed Vishvarupa, and therefore Vishvarupa's father performed a yagya to kill Indra. When Vritrasura appeared from that yagya, the demigods, in fear, sought shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and glorified him. Because of affection for the demons, Vishvarupa secretly supplied them the remnants of yagya. When Indra learned about this, he beheaded Vishvarupa, but he later regretted killing Vishvarupa because Vishvarupa was a Brahmana. Although competent to neutralize the sinful reactions for killing a Brahmana, Indra did not do so. Instead, he accepted the reactions. Later, he distributed these reactions among the land, water, trees, and women in general. Since the land accepted 1/4 of the sinful reactions, a portion of the land turned into desert. The trees were also given 1/4 of the sinful reactions, and therefore they drip sap, which is prohibited for drinking. Uh-oh. Because women accepted 1/4 of the sinful reactions, they are untouchable during their menstrual period. Since water was also infested with sinful reactions, when bubbles appear in water, it cannot be used for any purpose. So which of these statements is more controversial? Let's not get into it. After Vishvarupa was killed, his father, Twashtha, performed a sacrifice to kill King Indra. Unfortunately, if mantras are chanted irregularly, they yield an opposite result. This happened when Twashtha performed this yagya. While performing the sacrifice to kill Indra, Twashtha chanted a mantra to increase Indra's enemies. But because he chanted the mantra wrong, the sacrifice produced an asura named Vritrasura, of whom Indra was the enemy. When Vritrasura was generated from the sacrifice, his fierce features made the whole world afraid, and his personal effulgence diminished even the power of the demigods. Finding no other means of protection, the demigods began to worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the enjoyer of all the results of sacrifice, who is supreme throughout the entire universe. The demigods all worshipped him because ultimately no one but him can protect a living entity from fear and danger. Mm, mm, mm. Bhayam dvitiya biniveshatasyat. Seeking shelter of a demigod instead of worshiping the Supreme Personality of Godhead is compared to trying to cross the ocean by grasping the tail of a dog. A dog can swim, but that does not mean that one can cross the ocean by grasping a dog's tail. Being pleased with the demigods, the Supreme Personality of Godhead advised them to approach Dadichi to beg him for the bones of his own body. Dadichi would comply with the request of the demigods, and with the help of his bones, Vitrasura could be killed. Wow. Excitement, intrigue, drama, and devotion, all rolled into one. This is why this is the Grantha Raj. Text number 1, I'll read the Sanskrit. Shri Shukuvacha Tasya San Vishwarupasya Shiramksi Trini Bharata Somapitam Surapitam Anadam Iti Shushrama. Word for word translation says, Shri Shukuvacha, Shri Shukadev Goswami said, Tasya, of him, Asan, there were, Vishvarupasya, of Vishvarupa, the priest of the demigods. Shiramkshi, heads, Trini, three. Bharata, O Maharaj Parikshit. Somapitam, used for drinking the beverage soma. Surapitam, used for drinking wine. Anaadam, used for eating. Iti, thus, Shushrama, I have heard by the Parampara system. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Actually, in the sixth canto, I think many of the translations were done by some other devotees, which Srila Prabhupada, of course, signed off on. I'm not sure if that was for many other cantos or just the fifth and the sixth. Maybe some of our Bhagavatam historians can clarify. But anyway, of course, Srila Prabhupada gave his stamp of approval. Anyway, the translation says, Sri Shukadev Goswami continued. Vishvarupa, who was engaged as the priest of the demigods, had three heads. He used one to drink the beverage somarasa, another to drink wine, and the third to eat food. O King Parikshit, thus I have heard from authorities. Purport. One cannot directly perceive the kingdom of heaven, its king and other inhabitants, or how they perform their various engagements, for no one can go to the heavenly planets. Although modern scientists have invented many powerful space vehicles, they cannot even go to the moon, not to speak of other planets. By direct experience, one cannot learn anything beyond the range of human perception. One must hear from authorities. Therefore, Shukadev Goswami, a great personality, says, what I am describing to you, O king, is what I have heard from authoritative sources. This is the Vedic system. The Vedic knowledge is called Shruti because it must be received by being heard from authorities. It is beyond the realm of our false experimental knowledge. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Before saying a little something about this, please bear with me as I recite some prayers to some of our great devotees and to the Lord to set the tone for hearing and chanting about Krishna. Om Jnana-timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Parakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavam Scha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakanvitam Scha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagapate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namastute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sutta Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. The beginning of this ninth chapter of the sixth canto, we're starting to hear the story of Vritrasura, which is quite remarkable. And it will go on for several chapters and conclude with Indra learning some very valuable lessons. And if we are receptive, we can also learn some very valuable lessons. But in this first verse, something remarkable is said about Vishvarupa in that he has three heads. Of course, for most of us, our experience is that People have one head. We can't imagine, well, we can't imagine someone with three heads, but we probably haven't met someone with three heads. Although you may have seen some pictures or videos of people with two heads, and there's a few who famously lived for quite a long time, but oftentimes there's like two souls in one body. So actually, people can have more than one head. Generally, we view that as some sort of deformity and a fault. So it's not entirely implausible that there could be more than one head on a body. I mean, we see it. There's even the, I don't know if the one person or two persons, but there's these girls and they got married, even though they're conjoined. But here, what Srila Prabhupada is addressing in this purport is not so much what sort of strange anomalies can be there, but really how one can know something. I just gave an example. Our initial reaction is that no, 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 there's only one head. And yet, most of us have seen, if you haven't seen, I'll send you a picture or a video, that sometimes there can be two heads. Sometimes people have multiple arms. What this is referring to in the purport by His Divine Grace is something called epistemology. How do you know that you know something? And what we are willing to admit as devotees of Lord Krishna, as students of the Vedic knowledge, is that our senses are limited. That is an axiomatic truth, it doesn't depend on any other truth. It simply exists unto itself. Our senses are limited. You cannot see the back of your head. You cannot hear what's going on in this room. You can hardly smell anything post-COVID. And our taste buds are losing their strength as we age. All of the senses actually becoming weaker as we age. And yet, even though we experience this daily, we have the audacity to claim that, well, I haven't seen somebody with three heads. And so that's just the end of the discussion. So obviously, there's some fault to that method of knowledge, that epistemological approach. There has to be some fault there. And so we apply other means of knowledge besides just empiricism, which is called pratyaksha in the Sanskrit, to directly perceive with the senses. Aksha meaning eyes, and pratya like leading or first. Uh, Sometimes the senses are called indriya, or the eyes can be called indriyani. Indra, of course, meaning the leader, just like the demigod Indra that we're hearing about. It's very common in the Sanskrit literature to refer to a whole category of something by referring to the most prominent thing in that category. And because the eyes are usually the most prominent of the senses, all of the senses can be called indriya. So, besides the obvious limitation of our senses, the empirical approach to knowledge, we therefore employ some logic and reason to extend the range of our understanding of something beyond what is directly perceived. So even though I can't see past my bedroom door, I can use logic and reason to assume that there is actually a hallway to the rest of the home. And it's probably not uh, the kingdom of Narnia. If I open that door, probably will not step through to the kingdom of Narnia like in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, C.S. Lewis classic story. And why is that? The interesting thing, however, is that I can make that logical conclusion. I can use reason to determine what is on the other side of this door, but only because I have actually walked through the door, because I've perceived with my senses. And although I have already admitted that my senses are faulty, I will use reason to try to extend the limit of my senses, although really that reason also depends upon what is directly perceived by the senses. So there's naturally a fault in logic and reason as well. Another example that can be given is that if I'm standing some train tracks that go off into the distance. Looking at the tracks, I can see that they are parallel. And yet, if I look way off into the distance at the horizon, I might see what appears to be that the tracks are meeting at some point. This is, of course, an optical illusion. Train tracks must run parallel. They cannot intersect. But it might look like it way off in the distance on the horizon. But I can conclude logically, no. That must just be some fault of my senses that it looks like the tracks are intersecting. I can conclude that logically, and I can even confirm it by walking all the way down to that point, which I see on the horizon, and recognizing that, yes, the tracks are in fact parallel. But then I'm using those same senses to confirm that they're parallel, which just a moment before appeared to make the tracks look like they were intersecting. So the senses being limited is a big problem for both logic and reason and for empiricism. It's very hard for us to determine what is true. And Prabhupada reminds us all the time, fortunately, all the time. He says, it is beyond the realm of our false experimental knowledge. By direct experience, one cannot learn anything beyond the range of human perception. So a lot of people are really struggling with this. The most extreme form of this problem is solipsism, where people think that, well, I can only know what I perceive. I cannot know anything else beyond what I perceive. And so all I know for sure is that I exist. Everybody else here, you might just be some figment of my imagination, even though I see your names on the screen in the Zoom room. I don't know if you actually exist. I may have seen you with my eyes, heard you with my ears, but that's not conclusive that you act because my senses. And so perhaps I'm the only person that exists. And solipsism is hardly a philosophy. It's like 1% of philosophy and 99% mental illness. But that's an extreme form of dealing with this problem of the limitation of the senses. And a lot of people are actually struggling with this. There was this young woman who was coming to our center for a long time and who really started going down that rabbit hole, despite my best attempts to release her from this insanity. I failed, and she just told me explicitly she doesn't know if she exists or if anybody exists or whatever. So our senses are inherently limited. We cannot know anything for sure. We can use logic and reason to try to go a little bit further than the senses, but even what we logically conclude must be based on some sort of sensual perception. And so there is fault throughout the whole process. So in walks another type of knowledge acquiring method, an epistemological method, and that's called authoritative testimony. In the Sanskrit, we refer to that as shabda, what is heard from an authority. Now, here's the kicker. If we were to consider how much of what we know is directly experienced and how much of what we know is learned from some sort of authoritative testimony, like what is that ratio? Is 99% of what we know from some authoritative testimony? 99.9%? 99.99999%? Practically speaking, most of what we know is what we've heard from somebody else. I don't know anything about Portugal except what I've heard. I don't know much about biology except what I've read. I have not confirmed with experimentation on every particular thing. I've hardly confirmed anything. Most of what I've learned must have come from some sort of authority in the form of parents, school system, uh, some literature, someone composed by someone who is an authority or who thinks that they're an authority. Most of our knowledge, really, has to come from some authoritative testimony. Most of it is testimonial. There are some things that are implicit to us, but that we've learned from somebody else previously, like how to tie my shoes. That's no longer a testimony, but still somebody showed me how to tie my shoes. Maybe there are a few things that I know that nobody knows, which is therefore not testimony, like how lumpy my pillows are and how I need to get the pillow in just the right position so I can sleep comfortably. Okay, so that is my experience only. Nobody else knows about that, right? I didn't learn that from anybody else. You know exactly where I like to have the little dial in my shower so the temperature is just right. So there's a few things that are not received from testimony, but not a whole lot. Most of what we know actually has to come from some sort of authority, some testimonial authority. And so Srila Prabhupada is just referring to that here. So let's not have some knee-jerk reaction that, well, okay, so the Shastra says that there's a person with three heads, and now I'm just supposed to believe it? Yes, frankly speaking, most of what we know we have to believe because of having heard from some authority. And the method of knowledge is first and foremost to judge the quality of the authority, then to consider the possibility of the knowledge. That's the Vedic method. And that's the part that fails in material knowledge, is that we do not consider the quality of the authority. That is not a consideration. A person can write a book or produce some sort of media and profess their belief in a particular body of knowledge and a perspective and understanding it. And people can learn that and study it. You can take university courses all about one person's ideology and become an expert and get a degree and then go on and teach it to others. And it might be entirely wrong. That's a whole nother thing. But what is never considered, or hardly ever, is what is the quality of the person who said all of these things? Are they subject to the four defects? Are they vain and egoistic and therefore motivated in their perspective, or biased in a particular way? Rarely is that a consideration, except maybe specifically in the fields of political science. But the Vedic method is, since most of our knowledge must come from an authority, that's the epistemological method, therefore consider who is a good authority. Who should we learn from? It really comes down to that. And Srila Prabhupada has clarified that many times throughout his books here. That we have to judge. You have to hear from someone. For example, Prabhupada's saying here, although modern scientists have invented many powerful space vehicles, they cannot even go to the moon. What to speak of other planets? So we have to take something on authority because neither of us can confirm going to the moon yet. And it's remarkable that so many decades later, that's still quite controversial. And that even very, very intelligent people, I mean, I get to meet a lot of intelligent people here at Penn State, many holding doctorate degrees, which means they're well versed in the methods of knowledge and they're studied and apply critical analysis. And even they say quite explicitly, moon landing is very skeptical. But we have to either accept this person saying this or that person saying that. Our senses are limited. Our logic and reason, being dependent upon the senses, is also limited and hard and firm, either or. So what authority are we going to accept? So much of our knowledge comes down to that simple decision, which is within our power, which is within our agency to decide, to choose who is an appropriate authority for knowledge. So we should really think about it and apply that. There are, of course, self-evident axiomatic truths as presented in the Vedas. We don't take everything simply on faith. In fact, even Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Raja Vidya, Raja Guyam, Pavitram Idam Uttamam, Pratyaksavagamam Dharmyam, Susukam Kartamavya. In describing this most confidential knowledge, the most important knowledge about bhakti, he does say it's the king of knowledge and that it's a great secret, but also Pratyaksavagamam Dharmyam. It is self-evident. It's perceived directly. It's self-evident. And part of that evidence that is self-manifest, doesn't have to depend on anything external, is susukam kartam avyayam, that one becomes happy and joyful by its application. So there are also self-evident axiomatic truths from which we build a strong epistemological framework. How can we know something for sure? We have to recognize that so much of our knowledge must come from authoritative testimony, and therefore whose authority is worthwhile. Therefore, so many devotees will read the statements of Srimad Bhagavatam, particularly the statements of Srila Prabhupada, and say, yes, Vishvarupa has three heads. Prabhupada said so. Frankly, that's good enough for me. Also, it's not 100% relevant to my life. There's other things going on. There are other things that I can confirm here and now, and which are very important. And Vishvarupa's cranial situation is not high on my list of priorities. Anyway, what is high on my list of priorities is what Srila Prabhupada says about contacting Krishna by chanting his holy names. That we can confirm, having heard from a great authority, that the holy name of Krishna is none different from Krishna. We can also apply that knowledge, we can understand it reasonably, and we can perceive directly the satisfaction derived from chanting the holy names in the association of devotees. It does not require anything else, especially chanting the holy names of the Lord, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. It really doesn't require anything else. And it's very important for us, dear devotees, to consider the significance of this. There are many wonderful religious traditions of the world, and their theologies and their orthodoxy, often depends on a particular interpretation of the death of Jesus, or again, the testimony of what was said by Muhammad. Nobody wrote down what Muhammad was saying until like 100 years later. Then there's all the hadiths. It's just like a couple of people started going around after Muhammad was gone, said, well, what did he say about this and about that? And they started to compile things. And it depends on some interpretation. You have your catechisms, what we believe in this particular thing, and therefore, God must be like this or like that. Like anything, one bit of knowledge depends upon some other bit of knowledge. But the holy name of Krishna is something very different, and we should try to understand and appreciate. The holy name of Krishna transcends even those requirements. And this is described by the Supreme Personality of Godhead himself, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, in the most important part of all of Srila Prabhupada's books. There, I said it. Okay? The most important part of all of Srila Prabhupada's books is the Chaitanya Charitamrita Adi Lila Chapter 7. I said it, sue me. Srila Prabhupada he saw that this chapter is so important that even while the rest of the Chaitanya Charitamrita was being produced and published, he wanted this one chapter to first be published and printed as a standalone book. It was so significant. And therein, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu describes the significance of chanting the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. He describes to those Mayavadi sannyasis led by Prakashananda Saraswati. He says many remarkable things about chanting the holy names of the Lord. And Srila Prabhupada's purports are just packed with essential truths to really help us understand the significance about chanting Hare Krishna. Even compared to chanting other mantras, usually the form for a mantra is you have Om to indicate some transcendence, Namaha or Namaste. What is the offering unto a particular person? Then you have the name of the deity to whom you make an offering, like Vasudeva, followed by the suffix aya, meaning unto. I give unto Vasudeva my respects, or something like that. That's the usual form of a mantra. That's the method, the formula. But the holy name of Krishna is something very different. Krishna Nama Mahamantra E Svataba E. No, what's the one I wanted to say? Krishna Mantra Hoite Habe Samsara mochana, Krishna nama hoite pabe Krishnera charana. In saying different kinds of mantras, like our Kama Gayatri mantra, the Krishna mantra, very famously described in the Brihad Bhagavatamrita, one can get relief from samsara, material existence. But Krishna Nama, simply saying the holy names of the Lord, one can see face to face the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Well, literally, the lotus feet of the Lord. Krishna Nama hoite pade, Krishna Charana. The holy name of Krishna doesn't require anything else. Actually doesn't even require initiation. And this is very significant. This is what was being referred to in the last chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam that we were reading, chapter 8, all about Indra's chanting of the Narayana Kavacha mantra and how to receive the mantra, and how to chant the mantra, and how mantra must be received from the spiritual master within the sampradaya, right? Padma Purana says, Sampradaya vihinasye mantras te nishpalamata. You have to receive a mantra from the sampradaya, from the spiritual master, otherwise it cannot manifest. Generally, that's the rule, that's the restriction. But Hare Krishna, there's no such restriction. There's no requirement. Prabhupada gave as an example to Yoko Ono and John Lennon and George Harrison in describing this Sampradaya Vihinasya. He says that just like there may be 100% humidity in the air, but you can't drink a drop of it. Similarly, you can receive a mantra, but if it's not given to you by someone in the Sampradaya, then the mantra doesn't have so much effect. This actually we see all the time. In fact, just last week, some guy called me just on Thursday as I was rushing off to the program, late as always. Some guy calls me, I'm in the car, and he says, "Do you have any japa beads?" I said, "Yeah, we got some japa beads. You want some? Who are you?" Anyway, he came, Luca, from the country of Georgia. And he's like 20 something years old, some kid. And he said that he's just learning about meditation and chanting mantra and transcendental meditation online, Maharishi. I guess they're still around. And I was speaking with him. I gave him some japa beads, and he's telling me about chanting Gayatri mantra and so many things. And he's talking to me about it. And he said, "But I really like this mantra stuff, but they're so expensive. You have to pay a lot of money to get these mantras from TM." I guess that's how they do it. They literally sell you some mantras based on something. I guess you fill out a form, kind of like those things on Facebook, what kind of garlic bread are you, or which Disney princess are you? And then they give you some mantra based on some answers that you've given to the questions. And they charge you for it. Anyway, I don't want to spend too much time bashing TM, but here's a guy. That's his discovery of chanting the mantras. But he was asking me, like, is this the best way to go about it? It seems strange that I should have to pay for it and then have somebody give it to me. And I said that it's great to receive a mantra from someone who's practicing chanting the mantra, Sampradaya Vihinaste. And I shared that example of humidity and how you can't drink any of it. And I told him, as is described in this seventh chapter of the Adi Leela of Chaitanya Charitamrita, the Hare Krishna Mahamantra, which is really just the names of the Lord, it's the names of Radha and Krishna. It breaks the mold of the usual mantra formula. It does not require anything else. Even someone who is low and unqualified can chant the holy names of Krishna. Even someone who is a sinner to the utmost degree, like Jagai and Madhai, they can chant the holy names of the Lord and become completely transformed. In fact, most of us were here because of that experience, being completely unqualified, and even before coming in contact with a bona fide spiritual master, still by chanting Hare Krishna, one experiences the ecstasy of connection with God. It doesn't depend on anything else. This is an important epistemological point. It doesn't depend upon anything else. It's self-evident ecstasy in chanting Hare Krishna. So Srila Prabhupada, he says this is not just me, okay? So don't shoot the messenger. Srila Prabhupada says this in the Adi Leela, chapter 7, text number 76, purport. Just going to read a little bit of this and then I'm done, I promise. Prabhupada says to chant the holy name of the Lord, one need not depend upon other paraphernalia, for one can immediately get all the desired results of linking with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It may therefore be questioned why there is a necessity for initiation or further spiritual activities and devotional service for one who engages in the chanting of the holy name of the Lord. We don't actually need anything else. We can just chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So why all this other stuff? Prabhupada says the answer is that although it is correct that one who fully engages in chanting the holy name need not depend upon the process of initiation, generally a devotee is addicted to many abominable material habits due to material contamination from his previous life. In order to get quick relief from all these contaminations, it is required that one engage in the worship of the deity in the temple, or the worship of the Lord in the temple. So that's why. Actually, chanting Hare Krishna does not require initiation. It doesn't require anything else. And we should appreciate that. That doesn't mean that, of course, we should not take initiation. Prabhupada makes very clear in this purport why we all need initiation. But we should appreciate how powerful is the holy name of the Lord. That even it breaks the mold of other mantras, which has a formula, which have requirements. There are prerequisites to chant the mantra appropriately. It's difficult. Just 2 weeks ago, we did our 8-hour Om chant at the Bhakti Yoga Center, just because I wanted to try new things, see if I can get new people to come. And it worked. Some new people came. Everybody's familiar with Om. So we did an 8-hour Om chant. We sat down for 8 hours just chanting Om, just to get some new people in the door. And it's very, very difficult. It's very difficult. I could chant 8 hours of kirtan, no problem. But to sit in one place and to chant Om for a long time is very hard. And I could see that most people really couldn't handle it. But we set it up in such a way, Daniel was helping, just kind of like bringing people in off the street as he was doing books. And they'd come, they'd chant for some time, a few minutes, 30 minutes, an hour even. And then they'd go and we give them some flyers and books and stuff. And some, they managed to do it the whole time. But there's a lot of requirements for that. To have a profound understanding of the meaning of the Om mantra so that you can really be attracted to chanting, to even have the physical athleticism to be able to sit attentively without leaning against the wall and falling asleep. It's difficult to do. But Hare Krishna doesn't require any of that. It breaks the mold of all other mantras. And we should appreciate the significance of the holy name of the Lord. It's directly Krishna. Nama Chintamani Krishnas, Chaitanya Rasa Vigraha, Purna Shuddha Nitya Mukta, Abhinatva Nama Namina. It is Krishna. It is not a reference to a deity. It is not an appeal to someone asking for something. It is simply Krishna. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Dear devotees, let's appreciate the significance of chanting the holy names of the Lord. Initiation is something else. As described in this purport, Adi Lila chapter 7, text number 76. Initiation really refers to worshiping the deity in the temple. In fact, that's been the tradition for a very, very long time. This idea of the tradition for a very long time has been one becomes initiated in Brahminical practice to receive Gayatri mantras, to learn how to worship the deity, to say the appropriate mantras for worshiping the deity. That's what initiation is meant for a very long time. Then Advaita Acharya, so I've heard, really was the first to do just a Harinam initiation, initiating Lord Chaitanya's mother into simply chanting Hare Krishna. I can't really confirm that very well. But what we do know famously is that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, whose disappearance day is today, was our Acharya who established as a new principle that there is Harinam initiation and then there is mantra diksha. Previously, that wasn't such a thing. Those who received Diksha, initiation, they would receive a mantra Diksha. They would get a mantra. And at that time, it would be some sort of Siddha Pranali mantra, something to refer to your Swarupa so that you could cultivate Raga Nuga Bhakti. And many persons, however, did not approach the path of bhakti because of knowing and considering themselves unqualified to apply Siddha Pranali mantras. I mean, this is a very high level of bhakti, actually. And so they would not approach the community of devotees. They would not take initiation. They would not receive and chant the holy names of the Lord because of knowing themselves to be unqualified, frankly, to receive all of those mantras for worship of the Lord in a spontaneous way. So Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he really changed that. Traditionally, initiation meant Brahminical initiation, worshiping the deity, cultivating Raganuga. But Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur popularized this new idea of Harinam Diksha. One receives the holy name of the Lord. It doesn't require anything else. It can still be a relationship with the spiritual master by which one gets a sort of license to drive, a sort of license to chant, just like you can drive, even if you don't have a license, but having a license is a lot better. So he would give Harinam Diksha, and in this way encourage everyone to chant the holy names of the Lord, even if they're not qualified for the more traditional Brahminical initiation, by which one begins to worship the deity and cultivate Raganuga. Our Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, whom we are meditating upon and appreciating today, changed the whole game. Let me just say one more thing. I swear I'm going to stop because hopefully there's some controversial points enough to elicit discussion. Let me just say one more thing about the glory of our Srila Prabhupada and Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, about the holy name. And that is, they've made it so easy for us. Now, you all know me. I'm generally the most liberal of all Vaishnavas, maybe bested only by His Holiness Mukunda Goswami, who's extremely liberal. I'm very liberal. Everything goes. Krishna will sort us out. But considering the example set by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, Srila Prabhupada, even I have to admit, it's like they can't make it any easier. It can't get any easier than what's already been done. Giving us Harinam Diksha, making that the tradition, that you receive the holy name of Krishna from the spiritual master, that actually all is needed is to chant the holy name of the Lord, and everything else is well, supportive. That the main course meal is simply to chant the holy names of the Lord as much as possible, all the time. Kirtaniya Sadahari. They've made it as easy as possible. Srila Prabhupada, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, they've made the process so liberal, so inclusive, so accessible, so approachable, and so tangible. It really can't get much easier than what they've already produced for us, what they've already, designed for our progress in Krishna consciousness, all the way up to the lotus feet of Shri Shri Radha and Krishna in Goloka Vrindavan. It's like, how much more liberal can it get? You know? So this is me. This is the one time that you'll hear a conservative argument from me, is that by the grace of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, and of course his most preeminent student, our Srila Prabhupada, they've made approach to Krishna so easy, so accessible. It can't get much simpler. It cannot get much simpler. So let's take some time to really appreciate the significance of the holy name of the Lord, how we understand the holy name of the Lord, how it's different from the chanting of other mantras, how we understand all knowledge through the authoritative testimony of great persons. That's the best way to know anything for sure. So we're very, very, very fortunate on this day, on the disappearance day of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, to be somehow connected to him, to be the recipient of his grand scheme. He schemed this, that here we are in America, chanting Hare Krishna, talking about Chaitanya Charitamrita. That was his brilliant scheme. And so we owe so much to him. Hare Krishna. Grantaraj, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Goswami Maharaj ki jai. Itai Gaur Premanandi, Hari Hari Bo. Oh, Diatarika Brew, you have your hand raised. And I'm sorry I rambled on so long. I actually have to start work soon, but I'll try to be present for a few more minutes so that we can discuss more. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, you mentioned Siddha Pranali. Um, got a question and some comments. Question is, um, I'm wondering what you're drawing upon. You mentioned something about Siddha Pranali being a very advanced stage. Um, and I'm thinking perhaps you've read something that I have not read, because from what I have understood from Srila Prabhupada, he said specifically, Siddha Pranali is nonsense. Those are his exact words. That's verbatim. He said, Siddha Pranali is nonsense. It's manufactured by um, Sahajiyas. And some devotees have learned this from the Radhakund Babajis. But Srila Prabhupada warned us many times about this, that it is utter nonsense. What have you heard?
I don't know anything about Siddha Pranali, obviously, because heard the same from Srila Prabhupada. But I've heard a history of what the Vaishnavas were doing at the time of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur and Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, and I'm sure you've read that same history. There was a lot of Sahajiyism going on. There was a lot of assumption about one's Raganuga and what is your Siddha Swarupa and how you're supposed to attain that. And our Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he recognized that that was actually uh, inhibiting people from approaching Krishna consciousness. And that's why he instituted this new tradition of Harinam Diksha. That's all I know.
Yeah.
Obviously, I don't practice Siddha Pranali. My Siddha is Nitya Siddha, Krishna Prema, Sadhya Kabanoy. No, what is the other verse? Yeah, my Siddha is that just Krishna Dasa. What is that verse? Krishna Dasa? Can't remember now. Anyway, we're all eternally
Gopi
servants of
Bharat
Krishna. That's our
Pavana
Siddha.
Dasa Das Anudas.
Sure, that works.
Yeah, so Swarup City, should have probably explained this is not something, it is not given by the spiritual master. Some people have this idea that the spiritual master bestows this realization on the disciple. And at that time, he gives some mantra. And this is all a concoction, according to Srila Prabhupada. He said, there's in a letter to Upendra, he said, the spiritual master's duty is to train him, but when he comes to the professional stage of training, then he realizes his position. That is not a gift of the spiritual master. The spiritual master helps him to realize his relationship with the Lord. Just like a student in lower stages has to study so many things as preliminary education, English, history, math, etc. But in the higher stage of education, he has got a particular taste for a special subject, so he specializes as a mathematician or historian, etc. So that special qualification reveals in the higher stage. So these topics are not to be discussed in the conditioned stage, and when we come to the liberated stage, we can understand. This is useless talk in the preliminary stage. In the beginning, let us do the preliminary routine work very nicely and be cured of the disease out of Maya, and then we can know what taste you have for what particular type of food. But these things are not to be discussed at the present moment. But he, at different times, he had a lot to say about these things. And here's an instance from the Nectar Devotion. He says, We should be very careful about the so-called Siddha. The Siddha process is followed by a class of men who are not very authorized and who have manufactured their own way of devotional service. They imagine that they have become associates of the Lord simply by thinking of themselves like that. This external behavior is not at all according to the regulative principles. The so-called Siddha process is followed by the Vahakrita Sahajya, a pseudo-sect of so-called Vaishnavas. In the opinion of Rupa Goswami, such activities are simply disturbances of the standard way of devotional service. Now, there was an incident, a series of incidents actually that occurred here at Gita Nagari some time back. Um, I can't recall exactly the one, perhaps a year ago or so. We had one devotee who was attending our Zoom classes here and Srimad Bhagavatam class in the morning, and he was very knowledgeable, could quote a blue streak, had a awesome uh, knowledge of Shastra, and he began to uh, advocate for this idea of Sinapranali. No one detected what was going on, by the way, and none of the devotees attending our Zoom classes understood that this devotee was beginning to preach Vinapranali.
Oh, we
Um,
detected. We were just trying
huh?
to think of the right way to kindly ask him to stop coming to Bhagavatam class. So
Oh,
it was known.
oh, you perceive that?
Yeah,
Yeah,
talking about with
I,
Raja Leela, but we didn't want to insult him and just say, "Hey, we don't want you to come anymore."
I pushed back, and he responded by dedicating um, an entire discourse on Facebook to smash me. Anyway, I had a discussion with Dhruva, and we asked him to refrain from attending the Zoom classes. I mentioned this to Devamrita Swami, who was very concerned and wanted to know immediately. So did you smash him? I said, well, we basically threw him out. Um, anyway, the Cinepronally business is nonsense. Anyway, that's all I've got. Hare
Thank
Krishna.
you. Thank you for sharing,
Thank you
Prabhu.
for a very nice class.
Thanks for always keeping us on the straight and narrow. But in that regard, I just recalled something that I heard from my spiritual master talking about Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, though I don't know the exact reference, wherein he said that the Thakur said, you realize your Siddha Swarupa, your eternal form in the spiritual world, in kirtan with the devotees. And then you can cultivate that understanding of your Swarupa in your daily japa. I can't say any more than that because I have very, very slight realization, very small. But apparently that's another statement by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. So he wasn't saying there's some special mantra. He said, in the kirtan with the devotees, you should realize your Swarupa. And then Devamrita Swami said, you should realize it after 10 years of chanting. So I'm a little late, but we'll get there. Any other questions or comments? I know there's another class about the Thakur later today, so we should probably just finish here. Thank you, dear devotees, for tuning in. Grantaraj, Srimad Bhagavatam, Ki Jai, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Itai Gaur Premanandi, Hari Hari Bo.